What if the real reason your life feels out of control isn't the devil, your past, or your circumstances, but your mouth, your mood, your money, and your mind, every careless word, every emotional reaction, every impulsive decision, and every unchecked thought is quietly shaping your future? You keep praying for change, but God keeps pointing you discipline because He can bless you, but He will not override your self-control. Stay with me until the end, because the freedom you're asking for, might be on the other side of the control you have. You've been avoiding. There is a power inside your mouth that most people underestimate, dismiss, or misuse every single day. Not because they are bad people, not because they lack faith, but because they don't realize that words are never just words. Words are containers. They carry life or death, hope or fear, faith or doubt. What comes out of your mouth today quietly begins to shape the reality you will live in tomorrow. You may not see it immediately, but you will feel it eventually. Your mouth is not simply a communication tool. It is a steering wheel for your life. Many people pray for God to change their situation while constantly speaking against the very future they are asking for. They say they want peace but speak stress. They say they want faith but speak fear. They say they want breakthrough but keep declaring defeat. And then they wonder why nothing changes. It's because prayer without disciplined speech is incomplete obedience. You cannot consistently speak death and expect to live in life. What you speak repeatedly becomes what you believe, and what you believe determines how you live. Control your mouth does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means choosing words that align with truth rather than temporary feelings. Feelings change. Truth remains. When your emotions rise and pressure builds, your mouth becomes the first place the battle is revealed. Stress shows up in sarcasm. Fear shows up in complaining. Insecurity shows up in criticism. Pride shows up in exaggeration. And the enemy doesn't need to destroy you if he can simply get you to talk yourself into defeat. There are moments when silence is more spiritual than speech. Not every thought deserves a voice. Not every opinion needs to be shared. Maturity is revealed in restraint. The ability to pause before speaking is not weakness, it is wisdom. Some of the biggest regrets people carry are not about what they did, but about what they said when emotions were high and discernment was low. One sentence spoken in anger can undo years of trust. One careless word can reopen wounds that took a lifetime to heal. Your mouth will always reveal what is ruling your heart. If fear dominates your heart, fear will dominate your speech. If faith fills your heart, faith will come out of your mouth. You don't need to ask God what you believe. Just listen to how you talk when life doesn't go your way. Listen to how you speak when you're tired, disappointed, or under pressure. That is when your true beliefs surface. The problem isn't just negative talk. The problem is an undisciplined, heart-producing, undisciplined words. You cannot build a godly life with an ungodly vocabulary. The words you repeatedly speak over yourself become internalized and accepted as truth. When you constantly say, "I'm not good enough," you eventually live like you're not. When you say, "I'll never change," you stop trying. When you say, "This always happens to me," you begin to expect failure. Your words train your mind what to look for. If you speak defeat, your mind will search for evidence to prove you right. Faith-filled people don't deny reality, they define it correctly. They acknowledge pain without magnifying it. They admit struggle without declaring surrender. They speak honestly, but not hopelessly. There is a difference between saying, "I'm struggling," and saying, "I'm finished." One invites help, the other declares an ending God never authorized. Just because something is hard does not mean it is hopeless. Just because you are tired does not mean you are defeated. And just because you feel weak does not mean God is done. Control your mouth also means understanding the weight of words spoken about others. Gossip is not harmless conversation, it is relational poison. Sarcasm is not humor when it tears people down. Criticism without love is not truth-telling, it is pride in disguise. Every time you speak negatively about someone made in the image of God, you dull your own spiritual sensitivity. You cannot consistently dishonor others with your words and expect to walk in God's blessing with clarity and peace. The tongue may be small, but its influence is massive. It can ignite courage or crush confidence. It can bring healing or deepen wounds. It can unify families or divide them permanently. Many people want God to fix relationships while continuing to speak words that keep breaking them. Restoration rarely begins with an apology alone. It begins with a change in speech patterns. You don't rebuild trust by grand gestures alone. You rebuild it with consistent, controlled, respectful words spoken over time. When pressure increases, discipline must increase. The higher the stress, the more intentional your speech must become. Anyone can speak well when life is easy. Spiritual maturity is revealed when life is heavy and words are still wise. That moment when you want to lash out, complain, or quit is often the very moment your words matter most. The enemy doesn't attack randomly. He waits for moments of vulnerability when one sentence can do maximum damage. You will never accidentally speak life. Life-giving words are chosen, not stumbled upon. Encouragement is intentional. Gratitude is practiced. Praise is a decision. Complaining, however, comes naturally. That's why unchecked speech drifts toward negativity. If you don't train your mouth, it will follow your flesh. But when you discipline your speech, you interrupt destructive cycles before they become permanent patterns. Controlling your mouth is not about perfection, it is about direction. You will slip. You will say things you regret, but growth happens when you become quicker to repent, quicker to correct, and slower to repeat the same verbal habits. Over time, your default language begins to change. Hope replaces helplessness. Faith replaces fear. Gratitude replaces grumbling. And as your words change, so does your atmosphere. Your home feels different when your words change. Your relationships respond differently when your tone changes. Your inner dialogue shifts when your declarations align with truth. Many people speak kindly to others, but violently to themselves. They would never say to a friend what they say to their own soul. Control your mouth includes controlling how you speak about yourself. You are not motivating yourself by being harsh, you are reinforcing insecurity. Conviction leads to growth, but condemnation paralyzes progress. Words spoken repeatedly become words believed deeply, and words believed deeply shape decisions made daily. That is why controlling your mouth is not a small discipline, it is a foundational one. If you lose control here, everything else becomes harder to manage. A reckless mouth leads to a restless mind, fractured relationships, and unnecessary battles. But a disciplined mouth becomes a source of peace, clarity, and strength. You don't have to wait for life to improve before changing how you speak. Change your speech, and life begins to follow. Speak truth even when emotions disagree. Speak faith even when outcomes are uncertain. Speak life even when circumstances feel heavy. You may not see immediate results, but words work like seeds. They grow quietly, consistently, and eventually visibly. What you plant with your mouth today determines what you harvest tomorrow. Control your mouth because your future is listening. Control your mouth because your faith is revealed through your words. Control your mouth because God often works through what you declare, not what you complain about. Control your mouth because what you say today will echo into your tomorrow. Your feelings are real, but they are not reliable. They are powerful indicators, but they are terrible leaders. Emotions are like warning lights on a dashboard. They tell you something is happening, but they were never meant to drive the car. When your mood becomes the decision maker, your life becomes unpredictable. One good moment lifts you, one bad moment derails you, and you spend your days reacting instead of leading. Control your mood is not about denying how you feel. It is about refusing to let feelings determine who you become. Many people believe they must feel motivated before they act, but maturity works in the opposite direction. Action often precedes emotion. You don't wait to feel disciplined before being disciplined. You don't wait to feel forgiving before choosing forgiveness. You don't wait to feel faithful before obeying. If you allow your mood to control your behavior, you will always be held hostage by how you feel in the moment. And feelings are constantly shifting, influenced by sleep, stress, hormones, circumstances, and the opinions of others. The danger of living emotionally driven is not that emotions are bad, but that they are temporary. What feels overwhelming today may feel insignificant tomorrow. What feels unbearable in one season may become a testimony in another. But when you make permanent decisions based on temporary emotions, you create long-term consequences that were never meant to exist. Many broken relationships, abandoned callings, and missed opportunities can be traced back to one moment where emotions were allowed to take the lead. Control your mood means understanding that you can be tired and still be faithful. You can be discouraged and still be obedient. You can be afraid and still move forward. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is obedience in the presence of fear. Faith is not the absence of doubt, it is choosing trust even when doubt whispers loudly. When emotions dictate your behavior, your spiritual life becomes inconsistent. But when values dictate your behavior, emotions eventually align. Some people say, I'm just being honest about how I feel, but honesty without discipline becomes self-indulgence. Venting may feel relieving in the moment, but unchecked emotional expression often deepens negativity rather than releasing it. Rehearsing your frustration strengthens it. Repeating your anger reinforces it. Feeding your emotions with constant attention gives them more power, not less. Emotional health is not found in expressing everything you feel. It is found in processing feelings through truth. Your mood has the power to distort reality. When you are discouraged, everything looks harder than it really is. When you are angry, everyone looks like an enemy. When you are anxious, the future feels threatening even when it is full of possibility. Emotions don't just color your experience, they shape your perception. That's why controlling your mood is not about suppressing emotion, but about submitting emotion to something higher than itself. You don't feel your way into right living, you live your way into right feelings. Obedience often feels uncomfortable before it feels rewarding. Discipline often feels restrictive before it feels freeing. Consistency often feels boring before it feels fruitful. But those who wait for emotions to align before they act rarely experience the breakthrough they desire. Growth is rarely comfortable, and transformation is rarely convenient. Control your mood also means recognizing emotional triggers and patterns. If you always react the same way under pressure, that reaction is not random, it is trained. Emotional habits are formed through repetition. The good news is that what has been trained can be retrained. You may not be responsible for how you were wired or wounded, but you are responsible for how you respond. Healing begins when you stop excusing destructive emotional patterns and start addressing them. One of the most dangerous moods to live in is self-pity. It feels justified, but it slowly robs you of strength. Self-pity convinces you that you are powerless, overlooked, or uniquely burdened. It shifts your focus from what you can do to what has been done to you. And while pain may explain your emotions, it does not excuse unhealthy behavior. Staying stuck in a wounded mood keeps you focused on the past instead of preparing you for the future. Joy is not a personality trait, it is a spiritual discipline. Happiness depends on what happens, but joy is rooted in what you believe. You can choose joy even when circumstances are difficult, not because life is easy, but because God is faithful. Choosing joy does not ignore pain. It refuses to let pain have the final word. When you control your mood, you stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "What is right?" Your mood influences the atmosphere around you. You don't live in isolation. Your emotional state spills into your relationships, workplace, and home. A consistently negative mood drains people. A volatile mood creates insecurity. A controlled mood brings stability. People feel safe around emotionally mature individuals because they are not constantly walking on eggshells. Emotional consistency builds trust, and trust strengthens relationships. Control your mood by choosing gratitude over grumbling. Gratitude does not change circumstances instantly, but it changes perspective immediately. When you focus on what is wrong, your mood follows. When you focus on what is right, your strength returns. Gratitude doesn't deny problems, it reminds you that problems are not all there is. A thankful heart creates emotional resilience because it anchors you in what remains good even when life is hard. You are not called to be emotionally numb, you are called to be emotionally governed. Feel deeply, but decide wisely. Experience emotions, but don't be enslaved by them. God gave you feelings, but He also gave you wisdom, discipline, and self-control. When emotions rise, your values must rise higher. When moods shift, your commitments must remain steady. Control your mood means refusing to let one bad moment define an entire day, one bad day define a season, or one hard season define your life. Emotions are information, not instructions. They tell you what you're experiencing, not what you must do. You can acknowledge your feelings without obeying them. You can name your pain without letting it name you. Spiritual growth is not measured by how intensely you feel, but by how consistently you obey. There will be days when worship feels powerful and days when it feels routine. There will be moments when prayer feels alive and moments when it feels dry. If your faith depends on your mood, it will collapse under pressure. But if your faith is rooted in truth, your emotions will eventually follow. You don't need perfect emotional control. You need intentional emotional leadership. Lead your feelings instead of following them. Train your emotions instead of excusing them. Speak truth to your mood instead of letting your mood speak to you. Over time, emotional discipline becomes emotional freedom. And what once controlled you begins to serve you. Money is one of the most honest indicators of what truly has your heart. You can say you value faith, family, peace, and purpose, but your spending habits quietly tell the real story. Money doesn't lie. It exposes priorities, reveals trust, and uncovers what you rely on for security. That's why the subject of money is never just financial. It is deeply spiritual. Control your money is not about becoming rich. It is about becoming free. Many people think their biggest financial problem is not having enough. But more often, the real issue is not managing what they already have. Income alone does not produce peace. If it did, the wealthiest people would be the least anxious, and that is simply not true. Without discipline, more money only magnifies existing problems. If you are stressed with little, you will be stressed with more. If you are generous with little, you will be generous with more. Money doesn't change character, it reveals it. Control your money begins with understanding ownership. You don't truly own what you think you own, you manage it. When you see money as something entrusted to you rather than something you possess, your relationship with it changes. You stop asking, how much can I spend? And start asking, what is the wisest use of what I've been given? That shift alone brings clarity, purpose, and restraint. Stewardship replaces impulse, and peace replaces pressure. One of the biggest lies people believe is that money will fix their emotional problems. They think financial security will cure anxiety or financial success will heal insecurity. But money is a terrible savior. It promises safety but delivers pressure. It offers comfort but demands loyalty. When money becomes the source of identity, fear enters every financial decision. You don't just manage money, money manages you. Debt is rarely just a math problem. It is a discipline problem. It often begins with impatience, comparison, or entitlement. You see what others have, feel behind, and convince yourself that you deserve more now rather than later. Debt whispers that you can have what you want without waiting, without planning, without sacrifice. But what starts as convenience eventually becomes captivity. Payments replace peace, and stress replaces freedom. Control your money means learning to delay gratification in a culture addicted to immediacy. Discipline says no to now, so it can say yes to later. It understands that small, consistent choices compound over time. The problem is not the occasional purchase, it is the pattern of uncontrolled spending that slowly erodes margin. Margin is where peace lies. When there is no margin, every unexpected expense becomes a crisis and anxiety becomes the norm. Your spending habits shape your future more than your intentions do. You may intend to save, give, and invest, but intention without action produces nothing. Money obeys direction, not desire. If you don't tell it where to go, it will disappear quietly and leave you wondering what happened. Budgeting is not restriction, it is permission. It allows you to spend confidently because your money already has an assignment. Control your money also means confronting comparison. Comparison is expensive. It pushes you to buy things you don't need with money. You don't have to impress people you don't even like. Social pressure creates financial pressure, and financial pressure destroys contentment. When you measure your life against someone else's highlight reel, you lose gratitude for what you already have. Contentment is not having everything you want. It is wanting what you already have. Generosity is one of the most powerful ways to break money's control over your heart. Giving reminds you that money is a tool, not a master. It shifts your focus from accumulation to impact. When you give consistently, you train your heart to trust God rather than wealth. Generosity doesn't make you poorer, it makes you freer. It loosens the grip money tries to maintain over your decisions and emotions. Control your money is also about aligning your finances with your values. If faith matters, generosity should show up in your budget. If family matters, your spending should reflect that priority. If health matters, your money should support habits that sustain it. Misalignment creates tension. You feel conflicted because your values say one thing, but your spending says another. Peace comes when those two agree. Many people are stressed not because they lack money, but because they lack clarity. Financial confusion creates emotional fatigue. When you don't know where your money is going, you feel out of control. But when you have a plan, even a simple one, stress begins to decrease. Control doesn't eliminate challenges, but it gives you confidence to face them. Money has the power to magnify fear or faith, depending on how it is handled. When finances are unmanaged, fear grows. When finances are disciplined, faith strengthens. You stop reacting emotionally to every bill, every fluctuation, every unexpected cost. Instead, you respond intentionally. Emotional spending decreases, wise planning increases, and peace becomes more consistent. Control your money also means preparing for the future without obsessing over it. Planning is wise, worry is not. Saving is an act of wisdom, not fear. It acknowledges that life has seasons and prepares accordingly. At the same time, control means trusting God enough not to hoard. Balance matters. Extreme fear leads to stinginess. Extreme impulse leads to recklessness. Wisdom lives in between. You don't need to make more money to start controlling it. You need to make different decisions. Faithfulness begins where you are, not where you hope to be. Small changes practiced consistently create powerful results. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. Every wise choice strengthens discipline, and discipline produces freedom. When you control your money, you reduce unnecessary stress, protect relationships, and increase your ability to be generous and responsive when opportunities arise. Money stops being a source of shame and becomes a source of purpose. You stop hiding from financial reality and start facing it with courage and clarity. Ultimately, money will either serve your mission or sabotage it. It will either support what matters most or distract you from it. Control your money so it doesn't control you. Decide in advance what role money will play in your life and refuse to let it take a position it was never meant to hold. Every battle you face in life is first fought in your mind. Long before actions are taken, words are spoken, or decisions are made, thoughts are formed. What you think consistently becomes what you believe, and what you believe determines how you live. That is why controlling your mind is not optional. It is essential. If you lose the battle in your thoughts, you will struggle to win anywhere else. Your mind is constantly talking to you, interpreting events, assigning meaning, and shaping perception. The problem is that not every thought you have is true, helpful, or from God. Many people assume that because a thought appears in their mind, it must be accepted. But thoughts are suggestions, not commands. You can observe a thought without obeying it. Control your mind begins when you stop believing everything you think. Uncontrolled thoughts create unnecessary suffering. One anxious thought multiplies into 10 imagined disasters. One negative thought replays until it becomes a belief. One lie left unchecked slowly rewrites your identity. The enemy doesn't need to destroy your life in dramatic ways if he can quietly distort your thinking. If he can convince you that you are powerless, unloved, or hopeless, he can keep you stuck without ever touching your circumstances. Your mind naturally drifts toward what is familiar, not what is healthy. If you've rehearsed fear, your mind will default to fear. If you've rehearsed shame, your mind will revisit shame. Thought patterns are formed through repetition, and over time they become automatic. That's why mental discipline feels difficult at first. You are not just changing thoughts, you are retraining habits that have been reinforced for years. Control your mind means intentionally renewing it. Renewal is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. Just as your body needs regular nourishment, your mind needs consistent truth. What you feed your mind determines what grows. If you consume constant negativity, comparison, and fear, your thoughts will reflect that diet. But when truth becomes your primary intake, your thinking begins to change. Your thoughts shape your emotional state. Anxiety is often the result of unchecked mental rehearsals of worst-case scenarios. Depression can be fueled by repeated focus on loss, failure, or regret. While emotions are complex and influenced by many factors, thought control plays a significant role. When you change what you dwell on, you change how you feel. You may not be able to control every circumstance, but you can influence how your mind responds to them. Control your mind also means guarding what you allow into it. Not every voice deserves access. Not every message is neutral. The content you consume, the conversations you engage in, and the environments you choose all leave an imprint. If you constantly expose your mind to fear-based narratives, critical voices, or toxic influences, it becomes harder to maintain clarity and peace. Mental boundaries are just as important as physical ones. Many people sabotage their own progress through mental strongholds. A stronghold is a pattern of thinking that feels true, but is actually false. It might sound like, "I'll always be this way," or "nothing ever works out for me," or "I'm not capable." These thoughts feel convincing because they've been repeated so often. But familiarity does not equal truth. Control your mind means challenging these lies and replacing them with what is true. Even when truth feels uncomfortable at first, focus is one of the most powerful tools of the mind. What you focus on grows larger. If you focus on obstacles, they seem insurmountable. If you focus on opportunity, solutions emerge. Focus does not ignore reality. It chooses where to place attention. You cannot control every thought that enters your mind, but you can control which thoughts you entertain. What you dwell on eventually directs your decisions. Control your mind requires intentional interruption. When a destructive thought appears, you must interrupt it before it takes root. Left unattended, thoughts grow stronger. Challenged early, they lose power. This is not about positive thinking or denial, it is about disciplined thinking. Truth-based thinking acknowledges reality while refusing to exaggerate it. It confronts fear without surrendering to it. Your identity is closely tied to your thinking. If you constantly think like a victim, you will live like one. If you think like someone defeated, you will act defeated. But when your mind is anchored in truth, your behavior begins to align with that truth. You stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What if God is faithful?" The shift may seem subtle, but its impact is profound. Control your mind also means learning to rest mentally. Constant mental activity creates fatigue and distortion. When your mind is always racing, it becomes difficult to hear wisdom. Stillness is not laziness, it is clarity. Taking time to quiet your thoughts allows perspective to return. Peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of a governed mind. Many people are exhausted not because life is overwhelming, but because their minds are unrestrained. They replay conversations, imagine outcomes, and worry endlessly about things they cannot control. Mental discipline teaches you to release what you cannot change and focus on what you can. It redirects energy from worry to wisdom. Control your mind does not mean eliminating all negative thoughts. It means refusing to build a home for them. Thoughts may knock, but you decide whether to let them stay. Over time, as you practice mental discipline, your default thinking begins to shift. What once triggered anxiety now triggers prayer. What once caused fear now invites trust. What once led to despair now leads to hope. Your mind is the gateway to your life. What enters and stays there will influence everything else. When your thoughts are aligned with truth, your decisions become wiser, your emotions more stable, and your faith more resilient. Control your mind because your life will always follow the direction of your thoughts. Many people hear the word control and immediately think of limitation, loss, or pressure. They imagine rules that suffocate joy and discipline that drains passion. But that understanding is backward. Control is not the enemy of freedom, it is the pathway to it. The absence of control does not produce liberty, it produces chaos. True freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want. True freedom is the power to do what you should, even when you don't feel like it. Uncontrolled lives look free on the surface, but they are often the most enslaved underneath. When there is no control, impulses lead, emotions dictate, appetites dominate, and what begins as indulgence eventually becomes bondage. People don't lose freedom all at once, they surrender it in small, undisciplined choices repeated over time. Control leads to freedom because it puts you back in charge of the direction of your life. Discipline is not punishment, it is preparation. It trains you for the life you say you want. Athletes understand this. Musicians understand this. Leaders understand this. Yet, many people resist spiritual and personal discipline while still expecting exceptional results. You cannot drift into freedom. Freedom is built intentionally through habits that align with purpose rather than comfort. Control brings clarity. When your life lacks discipline, confusion multiplies. You don't know why you feel restless, unfulfilled, or constantly behind. But when control is present, priorities become clear. Decisions become simpler. Stress decreases not because life is easy, but because direction is established. Control doesn't eliminate problems, it reduces unnecessary ones. Self-control is not about willpower alone, it is about wisdom. Willpower tries to resist temptation in the moment. Wisdom removes unnecessary temptation ahead of time. It sets boundaries not to limit joy, but to protect it. A disciplined life is not joyless, it is focused. It understands that saying no to what is good can be necessary to say yes to what is best. Many people confuse freedom with options. They think the more options they have, the freer they are. But endless options often lead to paralysis, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. Control simplifies life, it reduces noise, it filters distractions. It allows you to invest energy where it matters most instead of scattering it everywhere and wondering why nothing grows. Control leads to freedom because it builds trust with yourself. Every time you keep a commitment, you reinforce integrity. Every time you follow through, confidence grows. Many people struggle with insecurity not because they lack ability, but because they lack consistency. They don't trust themselves to finish what they start. Discipline restores self-respect. It creates inner stability that no external validation can replace. Freedom without control is exhausting. You chase every feeling, react to every circumstance, and constantly adjust to whatever comes next. Control creates rhythm. Rhythm brings rest. When your life has structure, your mind has space to breathe. You don't wake up wondering who you will be today because you have already decided through disciplined choices. Control also protects relationships. Uncontrolled emotions damage trust. Uncontrolled words create wounds. Uncontrolled spending creates stress. But disciplined habits create safety. People feel secure around those who are consistent, measured, and intentional. Freedom in relationships grows when self-control is present because others don't have to fear unpredictability. Many people say they want freedom from anxiety, freedom from addiction, freedom from insecurity, freedom from financial stress. But freedom from something always requires control over something else. Freedom from anxiety requires control of thought patterns. Freedom from addiction requires control of impulses. Freedom from financial stress requires control of spending. You cannot pray away what must be disciplined away. Control is not about perfection, it is about alignment. You will fail at times. You will struggle. Discipline does not mean you never fall. It means you don't stay down. It means you correct quickly instead of excusing endlessly. Growth happens not when you avoid failure, but when you refuse to let failure define you. Freedom grows as discipline deepens. At first, control feels restrictive because your flesh resists it. But over time, discipline becomes desire. What once felt difficult becomes natural. What once required effort becomes instinct. This is how habits work. You don't think about brushing your teeth anymore, you just do it. In the same way, spiritual and personal disciplines eventually create automatic freedom. Control gives you options when it matters most. An undisciplined person has many options early, but very few later. A disciplined person has fewer options early, but far more later. Early discipline may feel limiting, but it expands future possibilities. Late discipline is far more painful because consequences have already accumulated. Many people want the fruit of freedom without the roots of discipline. They want peace without structure, joy without boundaries, success without sacrifice. But fruit grows from roots, not wishes. Control develops the roots that sustain freedom over time. Freedom is not found in doing whatever feels good. It is found in doing what leads to life. Control helps you choose long-term fulfillment over short-term pleasure. It keeps you from trading your future for a moment. It reminds you that comfort is not the goal, purpose is. When control governs your mouth, mood, money, and mind, life becomes lighter, not heavier. Decisions become clearer. Regret decreases. Confidence grows. You stop reacting and start leading. You stop drifting and start directing. Freedom emerges not because everything around you is perfect, but because everything within you is aligned. Control leads to freedom because it removes the tyranny of impulse and replaces it with intentional living. You are no longer at the mercy of cravings, emotions, or circumstances. You become responsive instead of reactive, grounded instead of scattered, steady instead of unstable. The disciplined life is the free life. It is not constrained by chaos or controlled by pressure. It moves with purpose, rests with peace, and stands with confidence. Control is not what takes your joy, it is what protects it. What if the life you've been praying for is on the other side of the discipline you've been avoiding? Not more talent, not more opportunity, not more favor, but more control. Because control is not about becoming rigid or losing joy, it's about becoming aligned. Aligned with truth, aligned with purpose, aligned with who God created you to be. When you control your mouth, you stop speaking death over your future and start declaring life. You realize your words are not casual, they are creative. They shape atmospheres, influence relationships, and train your faith. You begin to speak with intention instead of impulse, and peace begins to replace regret. When you control your mood, you stop letting feelings drive your decisions. You learn that emotions are signals, not commanders. You don't wait to feel strong to act strong. You don't wait to feel faithful to obey. You lead your feelings instead of following them, and consistency replaces instability. When you control your money, you break free from stress, comparison, and fear. You stop serving money and start using it. You gain clarity, margin, and generosity. Finances no longer control your peace because you've decided in advance what money will and will not have authority over. When you control your mind, you reclaim the battlefield where most victories are lost. You stop believing every thought and start submitting your thinking to truth. Fear loses its grip, lies lose their power, and your life begins moving in the direction of renewed, disciplined thinking. And when you understand that control leads to freedom, everything changes. Discipline no longer feels like restriction, it feels like protection. Boundaries no longer feel like punishment, they feel like wisdom. You realize that the most free people are not the most impulsive, but the most disciplined. You don't need to master everything at once. You just need to decide who is in control. Because the moment you take responsibility for what's within you, God begins to work powerfully through you. And the life that once felt chaotic, overwhelming, and reactive begins to feel focused, peaceful, and purpose-driven. This is not about trying harder, it's about choosing better. Choosing words that give life, choosing obedience over emotion, choosing wisdom over impulse, choosing truth over lies. And when you make those choices consistently, day after day, control becomes freedom, and freedom becomes the life you were always meant to live.